Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm JJWalsh, inbound ambassador in Hiroshima, and today we're talking to Chika Iwami in Melbourne, Australia. Thanks so much for joining, Chika.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy. How are you?
Good, good. I was telling you before we started that I'm a bit jealous because you're going into warmer season. And in Japan, we're going into the colder season. So I wish I could be in Australia as it's getting warmer. I grew up in Hawaii, so I really miss,
Yeah.
I like the warmer
So,
weather. Yeah.
yeah, it's a nice finally, the very, very challenging year. And I'm feeling a bit sorry for the rest of the world, but we just finally came out for a long, long lockdown. And we just came out from the long winter as well. And then just having that fantastic blue sky and a warm day today. So can't complain, it just can't
Yeah.
be better than this, I reckon.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And before we start, I have to give a shout out to Tina McCarthy of Wheel Woman and Melissa Mills of Sake Connect, who both recommended you for joining the
Oh,
series. Thank you so much, guys. That's awesome. Would you
thank you.
mind just introducing yourself, how you got started doing your cooking school a little bit?
Sure, no problem. So I'm Chika, and I'm originally coming from the Hyogo, Japan, living in Australia. This year, I think 14 years, getting into 15 years, I think. I was working for just normal 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, office job for quite a long time for a Japanese company, being in the automotive industry quite a long time. But it's my passion is always cooking, and my mother was always a great cook, and I think so did with my grandmothers as well. So just over the dinner parties and inviting friends and cooking for friends, many occasions. And every time we have parties or having just the cook up nights, I often got question about like, hey Chika, how do you cook the your rice? Your rice is fantastic. Or how do you cook your miso soup? And it's a very very basics. I always get question, and I was like, oh, would you want to know how to cook rice, or would you want to cook just the miso soup, which is very very simple for me. But then again, I guess there's not much conversation weren't there to talk about how to make the home cooking Japanese food. While the Melbourne, it's really blossomed the Japanese cuisine culture in Australia last 10 years. And it's something always going out to eat for Japanese food. It's nothing, never been something that you would cook at home. So I was seeing that's a big gap in there, and no one not really talking about the real home cooking, Japanese home cooking. So I was doing just a few over the couple of years. I was just doing a fun workshop with my friend, just casually friends inviting their friends coming to my place or visiting their friends to just doing that couple of hours to talk about how to cook rice or how to cook miso soup. Um, then I just really enjoyed, and everyone really enjoyed as well. And then some of my friends say, "Hey, Chika, well, you should start doing this. You should make it your business." And I thought, yeah, why not? So I just started about 3 years ago. Just set up the cooking class and then little course, and then start run from my kitchen, and that's how I got to where I am now.
Yeah, awesome. I also saw on your Facebook that you were teaching in high schools, local high schools,
Mm.
about Japanese cooking.
Yeah, so that was the last year. The Japanese language teacher, what's it called? Second language English, ESL teacher. No, the other way around. ESJ must be. So Japanese for the second language. Um, the teaching the group for the year age, so 14 and 15 years old girls. In the schools they learn in Japanese for a long time, and they just said that the teacher wanted to do something different, and then she said, would you want to do the cooking class? So I just went in there, again talked about very basic of the rice, and then we made the little rice balls like the temari sushi, which is vinegared rice, but you're just making that, putting it into the wraps, and it's making little bowls and it's just decorating with all different ingredients. And then that's something I did with the girls. That was very, very successful, and that was a really, really fun class.
Nice. I was so impressed when talking to Sake Connect Melissa or Wheel Woman Tina that it's possible to do language classes even as adults in Australia, in Melbourne. So it seems
Yeah.
like there's a lot of Japanese connections in Melbourne.
Mm.
So does that make it easier for you to find local ingredients as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't that much access to the local ingredients up to like 10 years ago when I originally came very first time. You needed to go to specific Japanese grocer supermarket. So there's one, well, couple of them, like a Japanese specific soup ingredient supermarket in Melbourne, about two or three of them. Um, but that was about 10 years ago. But now, if you're going to like an Asian grocer, which is normally each suburb has one or two Asian grocer, because Melbourne is very multicultural city, and there are lots of Asian residents as well. So it's Asian grocers everywhere, and Asian grocers started carrying a lot of Japanese ingredients. And now, last 2 years, I would say, now just normal standard supermarket start having the shelves carries the Asian grocer and also Japanese ingredients as well. So stuff like the mirin or sake or soy sauce or dashi stock or noodles, those very very like essential but basics but still essential stuff. You can easily buy supermarket these days, and it's a really new like it's really blossomed the whole Japanese food culture in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's great. I grew up
Mm.
in Hawaii, so of course we our supermarkets are full of local Japanese food. Like
Mm.
we have Aloha Tofu Company, which
Mm.
is locally made tofu. We have Hawaiian rice, which is Japanese style rice. Are
Mm.
you able to get rice and miso and natto, like the more difficult like Japanese ingredients, or do you make that yourself?
Yeah, it's a really good question actually. Um, in terms of like a tofu, probably all the time there's always Asians making locally here tofu shops. And you can buy probably two or three different brands. You can have the access, which freshly made in Melbourne here. But then again, recently I've heard there is one new shops popping up. Actually, Japanese lady making tofu in a Japanese style. I haven't gone to the shop because it's literally that's I've heard last 2 weeks. But all my Japanese friends say, "Oh, you can get it's like a Japanese quality Japanese tofu in Melbourne now." You know, and also I've got many friends making miso at home, and also I know that they're the Japanese people making that's actual business, and they sell the locally made miso paste from the Australian grown soybeans and Australian salt. So it's there are people making selling it. Koji definitely I hear more often these days. Though there are many people importing, and also they I know the few places actually they're making their own rice koji and then making dried and then they're selling that online. So you can have the again rice koji made from Aussie Australian grown rice. So those stuff it's definitely happening. Natto is kind of still imports ingredients, but it's really those fermented produce. Most of them you can buy imports, but then again you start seeing that locally made the fermented ingredients. You can buy from here as well these days. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
Mm.
One of the things that I love about your cooking classes and everything is because it's on home style cooking, you are very good at reusing all of the ingredients. So, for
Mm.
example, when you talk about dashi, making the dashi with the key ingredients, and then using those ingredients again to make a side dish or something. Or
Mm.
you're making chicken and then you use the bones for the broth for the ramen. Like there's in the maybe home style cooking, there's less waste because you're
Mm.
reusing everything. I love that concept. I hadn't really noticed it before.
Mm. Yeah, that's also probably if you live in Japan, that's kind of you see everywhere. That's you eat everything literally. Like if it's fish, you eat everything, heads to bone and then meat everywhere. So it's much more easy to do at home because you have on your pace and then you have time to look up the recipes. And then if you have the garden with the compost in there and just a tiny bit of a scrap you can in there and you can put back into the compost. And then yeah, I don't know if that's the specific for Japanese. But definitely the more people are aware of that the eating no waste eating, and then that's kind of new topics being talked about in Australia last probably 2 years as well. So definitely people more interested to eat more wisely and then more less footprint to the environment. Actually, and then Asian food or Japanese food help to eat in that way because cuisine itself already designed to eating everything. So it's nothing you need to adapt to it. Just if you follow that what we've been eating, how we've been eating in Japan, it's naturally leads into you eat everything eventually. So that's something a part of my passion as well, and it's really satisfying even you fill your fridge, then at the end of a week or at the end of the 2 weeks, you actually empty whole fridge without anything going to bin. And then that's something I really liked it. And I think that's something come from my mother as well.
Nice. That's such a great concept. And getting rid of food waste or having less packaging that you have to throw away or less composting. I mean, composting is great. That's great that you're doing composting. I noticed that one of your miso soups is called meal fridge clean miso soup. I love that. Can you explain that idea?
Yeah. So at the end of the week, you have like a bit of piece of carrot remaining, or daikon radish, or leafy stuff in the fridge, and the corners, and tiny piece of onions remain. Anything you chopped up and put in it, you can make the miso soup, and that's a best way to clean the fridge. At the end of the week. And people often ask me like, what can you make the miso soup with? And I tell them anything, everything that literally the things you put your Western soup, normal your soup, can be putting into the miso soup as well. And fish, meat, vegetable, little scraps in the fridge, just everything goes in. And then essentially that becomes part of the flavor. Then also you have nothing waste. So I love that way, and it's really, really easy, and everyone can do it.
Yeah, that's great. Miso soup is probably one of the few Japanese cooking that I do a lot. Because
Oh yeah.
we were vegetarian for a long time, and now two of us are vegan, two of us are vegetarian. But still, miso soup is really easy because you can reuse a lot of your great vegetables. You can get miso paste without fish now from Osawa or some of the good companies. Um, so it's really adaptable, I think, to a lot of different kind of lifestyles. Do you
Mm.
do you ever have a vegetarian or vegan customers or people who want to learn Japanese food but like a vegan version or vegetarian version?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, a lot of people, I would say almost half of people coming to my cooking class, they are vegan or vegetarian. While they're not really recognizing that it becomes kind of tricky to make the vegetarian Japanese cuisine. Somehow there are many people imagining Japanese food very healthy, therefore that's probably the easy way to make it vegan or vegetarian. It's easy to be a pescatarian, very easy, but it's not so much, especially for vegetarian, because fish existing everywhere. But having said that, if you follow the Shojin style cooking, so Shojin is something the Buddhist practice of the eating. So essentially it becomes vegan. So there's a lot of recipe around the Shojin cuisine, and one of the things is dashi stock. I make the Shojin dashi stock, which you don't use the bonito flakes. So you stick with the kombu kelp, shiitake mushroom, and then you just need a few more ingredients. Brings a little bit more sweetness. Often use like a peeled, semi-dried the carrot skins. Some people use roasted soybeans to put them in soaked in the water. That becomes essentially vegetarian or vegan stock. So there are a lot of people coming, and I'm teaching those dashi stock because if they wanted to buy those pre-made sachet ones, again, if you read the package behind, it's always hidden bonito extract, fish extract. It looks like vegetarian, but if you look very, very carefully, there's always some sort of fish in there. So I'm just telling them, just be careful you read in the back, and then even though you can't get the vegetarian version from the pre-made powder version, it's easy to make it from home as well. So that's I'm teaching that the Shojin dashi stock base. And as long as you fix that dashi stock becomes vegetarian or the vegan, then you can use the dashi stock to make all the other dish like miso soup, and then that becomes the vegan food. But the dashi stock is always tricky part. It's always contains some fish. But there's a way to make it that vegan, and that's something I really enjoy to teach the people.
That's great. Because I do tourism, destination, and business consulting, one of the things for inbound is I always try to encourage them to find a vegan dashi. Because if they have vegan dashi, even if they just keep it in the freezer, and then if the vegetarian or vegan comes, they can make the vegan dashi soup base or miso base, or all the food depends on the dashi, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So if your dashi has fish, already there's nothing that the vegan or vegetarian can eat, which is kind of a shame because it's more than 10% of inbound visitors to Japan. 10% are seeking the vegan vegetarian diet. And sometimes I meet people traveling and they are only eating at the convenience store, or they're, and like, oh, that's horrible because Japanese food is so good. But if you can't eat fish, there's a lot of problems because of the dashi. So I'm so happy to hear that you're teaching how to make the vegan vegetarian dashi. I'm showing your picture right now. So you've got the roast soybeans, you've got the katsuobushi, you've got the kombu, you've got the shiitake. So basically it's just the fish flake that if you take out, you can make a vegan dashi. It's not impossible, right?
It's not. It's really really accessible than you think. Once you create the habit to have the dashi stock ready in the fridge, it's compared to, this is what I always explain in my cooking class, but compared to like a beef broth or chicken broth that I use the French or Italian or Chinese or other cuisines stock, which requires you cooking that bloody 6 hours, 12 hours, you just need to boil it off. It's so much easier. Dashi stock is so much easier because literally you can make in 10 minutes. Sometimes you even don't need to boil it. You just put them soaked in water, and that's ready to use dashi stock. And all you need to be careful about is you just don't put the katsuobushi bonito flake in there, and then you just need to substitute a little bit more, give us the flavor. Like I said, like carrots, skins, or something like roast soybean that will make it a flavor a little bit more rich. But it's a very very accessible way to make in dashi stock.
That's great. And of course, dashi is so important for your cooking class. You have a whole class just about dashi, right? Dashi 101. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, after that's big. When I started cooking class, or think about the menus, the first thing that comes is a Dashi Stock. And then also, if you're looking cooking books published in English, it's always some sort of a saying Dashi Stock. And every time, if you look at the cooking books, they only talked about this much about Dashi Stock, just a tiny bit. But I just feel like if you never cook Japanese food, if you never come across Japanese ingredient, how would you be possible to know about Dashi Stock with just description of the one paragraph? And then that's also stopping a lot of people to cooking Japanese food because it's too complicated, it's too foreign to them. So when I started cooking class, I thought, is that ridiculous to have just a class talking about Dashi Stock? I just was thinking am I going too far? But I thought, no, I'm gonna put up a class and see what's gonna happen. Because I know people will ask me, and I know that I can't explain in 5 minutes. I definitely need 2 hours to going through the ingredients involved, what to do. Then once you capture that, it's easy. But unless you taught, you never knew about it. So yeah, I'm just gonna put up the class, and then that's actually my favorite class to talk about it. That's very essential, very simple, but that class really make the people really wow, because it's foreign, it's new, but then again, once they know what they are doing, it's so easy and then makes such a big difference to their cooking. So that's really fun class to run.
That's great. And you use dashi in so many different dishes. It's not just for soup, right? You use it in many side dishes too. Kyle has a great comment here. He says, I'm glad to know that it is okay to use, to add other items into my miso soup rather than just the strict traditional recipe. If I improvise, it's fine. Thank you, he says.
Yeah, absolutely. Living in Australia, some of the fresh ingredients are fantastic. Some of the ingredients you can find it or you can find same as quality as you find in Japan. But some of the ingredients you can easily find here, but you can't in Japan. Sometimes surprising goes well with Japanese food, such as like a kale. I think it's kale getting a bit trendy in Japan as well, coming up now these days.
Yeah,
but the kale,
a lot of organic farmers are growing a lot of beautiful kale in Japan too. Yeah.
So the kale is very common in here, but it's kind of still new things in Japan. But the kale is brilliant. It goes so well with Japanese food. Or like a cauliflower, probably not everyday's ingredients in Japan, but cauliflower goes very well in Japanese food. Broccoli, zucchini, those, or asparagus, is very affordable in Australia. Like those very Western vegetables actually goes well with Japanese food, and all of them goes so well with miso soup.
Yeah, great. Makiki 1000 from YouTube, thanks for joining. She says, can you buy dashi kombu in Australia?
Yes, you can. Dashi kombu, it's a little bit tricky place, but because Japanese, strictly speaking, I believe, I haven't gone back to check the yet, last probably about a year. But kombu dashi stock is actually, you're not allowed to import from Japan to Australia. Not yet. That's because of the 2011 earthquake. The things happens, and then that import list is still kind of strict, and some of the items hasn't been approved yet. Hasn't been come back to the approved ingredients. And kombu is one of those. But having said that, you actually can find Japanese kombu from the shops time to time. And also, Korean use the kombu as well a lot of times. And then there are lots of Korean grocer in Melbourne. And so I often use a Korean kombu. It's a little bit different shapes. They comes out in Japan. Japanese ones comes kind of small stripes like that, often. While Korean ones comes big kind of rectangle sheet coming. But flavor slightly change but has got a very own unique flavor to Korean kombu as well. And then I like it, and then I also use it. And the funny part is there are few people in here in Melbourne, the people doing oyster farming, I think, some areas, they start finding that, finding out is actually seaweed and kelps has great possibility to be in the market. So there are a few farmers or fishmongers, they start harvesting and then selling to the market. So if you go into farmers market, you sometimes see some of the fishmongers start selling the kombu. Sometimes the fresh, sometimes the dried version. So now you can have the access to Australian local kombu kelp as well. And then they are fantastic. The flavor is incredible.
Wow, great. Melissa Mills, thanks for joining from YouTube. She says Australians are really embracing Japanese ferment culture, but we always need to learn more around these fascinating foods. Thanks, Chika-san, for teaching us.
Pleasure.
Let's talk about local fish. I notice you use a lot of sardines. One of the recipes, you're like marinating or soaking the sardines so that you can easily eat the bones. And of course, this goes back to food waste as well, or using the entire fish. But are you finding the local fish is suitable for Japanese food?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in close to the market called Queen Victoria Market. So my go-to market is Queen Victoria Market around the corner, and then they have a huge fish hall, and then you can access all sort of the fish. Unlike in Sydney, so Sydney is farther a bit north from Melbourne. The Sydney has got like a dedicated fish market where you can have directly from the fisherman. I think that's directly from port. If I could be wrong, that's my memory from 15 years ago. But they have a huge fish dedicated market, and that's great. While Melbourne, we don't have it. But then again, having said that, though, all market, the Queen Victoria Market, Prime Market, South Melbourne Market, Preston Market, there are lots of market where you can buy really, really fresh fish. And if you go into the early morning, you see all the fish still, the gills is so bright and rich red and crystal clear eyes. And it's a really top quality. And sometimes I've got my friends coming over in Australia and take them into the market, and they're quite surprised how good quality fish we have and how fresh they are. But you really don't have a fresh fish access in supermarket like you can do in Japan. If you go to supermarket in Japan, you have whole fish. You have the fillet of fish, very fresh quality. Unfortunately, you can't have the access to it in the supermarket. You had to go into the market, actual market. But if you can spare, like 1 hour morning, you can go into before work. It's definitely accessible for the fresh fish. And then it really depends on the court. Every day is different. Depends on the season. You find something really fresh. And sometimes you can find a fish that you'd find in Japan, but you don't know. Sometimes you don't know the names. But by look of it, you just judge like that looks like a little bit look like snapper. Maybe I give it a go. Then just buy whole fish or sometimes ask them to fillet it. And then just do a little bit pan fry and have a taste and say, this is actually tastes more like mackerel, or this is similar to snapper. Then you know the fishing locally.
Wow, I heard a friend of mine. They're running a Japanese restaurant in England, and they have trouble to get the fish which is fresh enough for sashimi. But I see that you're using sashimi in your cooking class, so you can find the suitable local fish which is for sashimi as well. That's great.
Yeah, you can. So I don't do the much sashimi in my cooking class, but I do making a fish sashimi fillet for myself. I normally see the eyes and use how fresh they are, and then if you see in the guts, you can tell like how fresh it is. Then I sort of make my own my judgment. But if you can't make your own your judgment, which it's very common, you just go into fish mangler and then make the friends from the shop. That's what I always say. Just keep going back to the same shop and have a little chat with them and get them to remember who you are. Also, try to go at the same time, same day, so that they remember you. Once they remember you, you can ask all sort of question when that was caught, where was caught, how fresh they are. Then of course you can ask, can I eat raw? Can I eat sashimi? And they will tell you, yeah, absolutely, or maybe probably not suited. So if you can make a judgment, ask them, and then keep going back. Then you will have the fresh enough to eat as a sashimi. Yeah, just ask. That's how people say, how they tell the
I
people.
notice you have a class all about fish. So autumn fish class, right? So there is enough fish talk for 2 hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of, I love your reuse and more sustainable fish because you're using smaller fish or locally caught fish. These are all key features of the fishing industry, which can have lots of problems in terms of sustainability for fishing industry because of pollution in the water, plastic waste. But if you're using small fish, if you're using coastal fish, it's much more sustainable. And it looks like a lot of your recipes are using that. I also noticed you talking about duckfish. Is that a local fish? I'd never heard about that.
I'm not sure. Sorry, I don't have the answer for you where that caught really, but duckfish I've never seen in Japan.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty striking look of the fish. And it does look like a duck has got a kind of long spout, like it looks like a duck spout. I don't know where they're called, but happen to see time to time. And then again, if you ask them at the shop, like, can I eat as a sashimi? Or I think the duckfish, I even didn't ask. They told me, like, they know me, so they just said that, well, I've got the duckfish today, and I just said, how do you eat? And they said it's fresh enough to eat in the sashimi. So that's how I got to know.
Yeah, I'm showing your picture now of the duckfish sashimi with natto, fermented soybeans on rice. So your pictures are so beautiful.
Oh, thank
Maki
you.
also says pictures are really beautiful and looks oishiso.
Ah, thank you.
Nice. I love also how you're using your grandfather's ceramics.
Yeah. So there are a few old ceramics around at my parents' place. And obviously, all of us kids left home already, so they just only two of them, and my grandmother with them. So they don't need all those ceramics. They don't need all utensils anymore. So they're trying to, minimizing things and try to clean up around them. So they trying to decluttering around them. Then they're very keen to throw them out, put them into recycle shop or second hand shop. So I'm just telling them, don't do that yet. Just it will take time, but eventually I'll take them all. So I'm happy to take them all, those old ceramics. And there are a lot of them are from my a lot of them grandmothers, and then some of them are from my grandmother's father, I believe. I don't know whose stories, but some of them just coming up from the incredibly old books. It's very old fashioned books, and it's been there for ages. I reckon it's for their home forever, and no one hasn't touched. But they are really beautiful, and it's sometimes almost too fragile to touch and fragile to use. But my father and my mother, both of them recommend, like, encourage me to use rather than put them away, which they did. So they say, well, it's a ceramic. They all ceramic is supposed to be used and supposed to be, on a dining table. It's not supposed to be packed away, but it's not supposed to be displayed on a showcase. It's meant to be used. So they both say, don't get so worry about it. Just use it every day, and if you break it, it's a break it. So it be. They're saying kind of that's the destiny of the ceramics. And they always
I
say,
love
if
that.
something that's valuable, it is something meant to be last long time, it will last. It will goes into right-handed, and then that will looked after, so they will last. So just follows the destiny of the ceramics. Then use and make the most of that. That's what my parents encouraged me to do.
I love that. And it's so different from the idea that I grew up with where, like people always have the good china or the good
Mm,
ceramics and they only get it out for special occasions. Um,
mm,
but when I was talking to Paprika Girl about ceramics, she wears kimono, she does tea
mm,
ceremony, and she's always collecting beautiful ceramics, and her
mm,
idea is you should enjoy your food every day, and the
mm,
ceramics really creates the nice eating experience, and you can see that in your beautiful photos how you're showing the
mm,
food in the beautiful ceramics. So such a nice feature of using
mm.
your grandparents ceramics. I love it.
Yeah. It's definitely part of the Japanese cuisine culture to enjoy the ceramics as well. That's something I teach. That's something I teach in a class as well. Like, you can stick with big white dinner table, dinner plates, but don't get too scared about mixing the plates. It's in Japanese cuisine. It's meant to be just mix all the colors, different patterns, different sizes. There's no rules. You don't need to have all the same sets. It's always mixed up, and that's part of the fun. And when you enjoy the meals, you enjoy the ceramics, and then you just give that, appreciation to all the potters and artists behind as well. So
Yeah,
it's definitely part of the Japanese culture as well.
I love that. Let's talk about some of the desserts that you teach. I think,
Uh,
especially for me, I love dessert. Maybe like many women, we always look forward to the dessert. It's so nice to see that you're teaching Japanese desserts. I imagine that
mm,
that was really hard to make in Australia. For example, the sweet and savory dango that you have with the
yeah,
sauce.
yeah, yeah. Ingredients is not that difficult. Because most of the ingredients you require to make in Japanese food, firstly, azuki red beans. Australia grow a lot of azuki red beans, so you can buy very affordable azuki red beans in Australia. Other main ingredients could be glutinous rice flour, which is sticky rice, mochi gome in Japan, in Japanese. Sticky rice, glutinous rice flour is used widely for other Asian cultures as well, Chinese, Thai, like everyone uses in the Asian culture. So you can buy, often you see the Chinese glutinous rice flour or Thailand, I think, Thai. So if you don't, if you're happy with and open to the other overseas produce, it's very affordable and very easy to find. Rice flour, the same for any Asian cultures use, so you can find very easily. And then what? Sugar, soy sauce, always there. You always can substitute Japanese ingredients with other Asian culture ingredients, and that's much more affordable and it's really accessible from everywhere. So it's not that hard actually. And then soy sauce, sugar, it's always there. As long as you know what to look and where to find for the ingredients, it's definitely impossible to make in a sweets in Melbourne or Australia.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's great to see that you have the complete package, right? You have the side dishes, the main dishes, the desserts, Everything. And you also did a kind of collaborative project making your own sake and then using the kasu for different
Mm.
ingredients. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that was the project done with the Sake Connect, Melissa from the Sake Connect, and I was the invited for the group. So that's a little Facebook group. And I think that was originally idea was start for the Melbourne people or the Aussie Australians who were in those lockdown, the COVID-19 lockdown, and then we couldn't go out. So all things is we had plenty time at home, so we could have we could make a sake at home, and which was great idea. So I was involved, but I think in the end that was it. People were looks like everywhere, around the world. So I have never done it, the making a sake before at home. Plus, I think you're not allowed to do it in Japan. But we are in Australia. So I was very interested. And I thought, oh, why not? I'll give it a go. So Melissa did all instructions online, and everyone in the group followed that instructions. Then we started on the same week. As you go over the 2 or 3 weeks, everyone going through the same stage, but because different climate, different conditions, everyone has got different, progress, and then we just share that on the Facebook group. So I'm breastfeeding my son at the moment, so it's tricky for me to drink the sake itself, which I still do between those feed. But the biggest, the most exciting part of the making sake was making the getting that sakeri, which is sake kasu in Japanese. Sakeri has got so many things you can make. You can make it sweet. You can use sake kasu as the alternative of the vegan version of the cheese. You can ferment meat and then fish in the sake leaves in there, and it just so much things. Like it's almost like a miso paste, I think. So it's another fermented product that you can use so many other things. So I was so excited because I think I've never seen sake kasu in Australia or never come across from the friends. So I was just so excited because so much sake kasu that I wanted to do so many things. So I sort of made it, fermented beers, or I made biscuits. What did I do else? And I made it from the bread starter. So instead of making sourdough, we made sake kasu sugar dough. And that was great. That was also Melissa helped us to start up. But that's got me into the bread making, which I've never been to. So that's great. So now that helps me to doing the shokupan, which is something new and new things in Melbourne now. But a lot of people talking about shokupan in Melbourne now. So I managed to make it on my own. So that all things, it was a really good learning curve. And also, while I can't go back to Japan, a lot of people can't go to Japan at the moment, you have access to something really authentic things. And also like making the bread that, again, shokupan, that you can, have the access here. You can make it. So that's really helped to get us through to the lockdown.
Yeah, it sounded like a great project. And I talked to Melissa about it a little bit in her interview in the series as well.
I
What do you think is the most difficult dish that you teach in your classes? I noticed you're doing the egg roll or the dashi tofu. There's some dishes seem more technically difficult. Are there any that your customers or your students find a little bit difficult?
That's a good question. When I started, I thought that's the tamagoyaki, rolled egg, or making dumplings. The gyoza holding could be quite difficult technique to them. But those weren't really. Like once I show a few times and I get that right techniques, they just master pretty much straight away. But the one thing that I really find that people seem to be really struggling to making rice bowl. And Yeah, it's like sounds a very simple thing. Um, then I didn't think that's gonna be so hard for them to doing it. But very early on the classes, I tried to teach them to making triangle rice balls, which you need to form your one hand like a making triangle shape, other hand also making the triangle shape, and you put together. Then as you making the rice ball, you need to flip on the sideways. But since there a lot of people come putting in that, context that what look like a final shape, then how you need to form your hands, and then that cooperation, some people can't really figure it out, and then yeah, that's something. The triangle, making the triangle rice ball was a really really tricky part. Um, but then again, rice ball, I explain people rice ball onigiri is essentially directly translation is a grip. So nigiri is meaning you just send a grip. So I told them to like a triangle shape or the tube shape common in around the Osaka or Western area. There's no rules. Like a triangle shape was more common back and then is around eastern areas. The tube shape was more for around Osaka areas. Then total round ball was more common in a southern like Kyushu areas back in those days. So it's really depends on regions. As long as rice in a one piece, um, that's essentially rice ball. So I told them to don't get so disturbed by you can't make improper triangle shapes. It's just very common you see in a convenience store these days. That's why you think that you should be making it, but it's not. Like as long as you have used your hand, put the rice together with your love, that's the rice ball. So in the end, everyone get to making it, but it seems to be the triangle rice ball is very challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah. I find the musubi, the handmade musubi is so delicious, and when I travel outside Japan is something I really miss, and my kids who grew up in Japan, they miss it so much, right? So I noticed you're doing a class only about rice. So are you
Mm,
teaching musubi, and what other rice dishes are you teaching?
yeah, so that's another on the side of the dashi stock. That's another thing. So I often get the question about Chika, how do you make your rice? And I was like, you serious? You want to learn just cooking rice? Like I was like, would I even teach how to cook rice? But there are seems to be people wanting to learn. And there, as I go, a few tricks that I saw that's everyone's common knowledge is not. So that's I decided, all right, I'm just gonna do the class just dedicated for rice class. So in the rice class, I teach them how to prepare the rice, how to cook the rice in saucepan, as there are not so many people had rice cooker at home in Australia. So I told them how to make in a saucepan, how to, then electric stove or otherwise the gas stove. Then teach them how to store, how to put in fridge, how to put in them in the freezer, how to reuse it, how to rewarm the rice. Then also teach the rice how to make the rice ball. Then also as part of the how to reuse day or 2 days of rice, I talked about making a congee zosi. Congee is a nice way to reuse the old rice.
That's
Um,
like a rice soup,
and
yeah? Congee
pardon?
is like a rice soup, right?
Yeah, so it's almost like a porridge. Yeah, congee. So just cooked rice in soup stock. So it's kind of becomes kind of porridge kind of texture of the soup. But that's just really nice way to use the old day old or 2 days old rice. Put in a fridge, so it's very dried up. But by putting it into the soup stock, that helps to hydrate the rice again, and it gives a really nice comfort food to the people. So
Wow.
that's something I teach in a class.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that people would want a class just about rice, but you're
Mm-hmm.
you're teaching the basics, the essentials,
Mm-hmm.
right? if you learn all about rice, if you learn all about dashi, if you learn all about fish, you can make any Japanese food, right? So
Yeah,
learning the basics is really key part of your teaching, I think.
exactly. Because Japanese food is not only making teriyaki chicken or sushi or tempura or ramen, you know, like the tempura, ramen, sushi. That's something you wouldn't cook at home in Japan. That's something you go out and eat. And I wouldn't spend, 6 hours to making ramen noodle soup. Um, and they are, professional sushi chef and tempura chef that they spend entire their life to master the skill. So I'm not gonna pretend I can do it and I can teach. Those ones I leave it to the professionals to making beautiful meals, and you can enjoy and go and eat. But um, every day we eat, it's always around rice, bowl of miso soup, and then one main dish and one or two more side dish, and then that's a real what we eat every day. And then to make that, you really need to do basics. It sounds very complicated, but once you master that, from there you just change fish to meat to vegetable, miso soup ingredients to mushroom to cabbage, or then just as you change the ingredients, once you learn the basics, you can just make so much more dish. And I really want to help the people to have the basic set skills so that they can cook at home with things in their fridge or things you would buy from supermarket every day. Um, that's something I'm trying to get them to. I really want to get people to start cooking Japanese food at home.
Yeah. Well, that's a great concept. And on your website, you say you want people to think of Japanese cooking as something they can always make or easily
Mm,
make or make every week or every day if they wanted to. And I think
mm,
the kinds of dishes you're teaching are very healthy, using local ingredients. So, in terms of sustainability, you're helping people be healthy, but also supporting the local economy. There's so many great
mm,
connections to sustainability. So I really
mm.
appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have a few more minutes. I'd like to hear what's your upcoming plan, or what do you
Mm,
hope to do now that things are kind of moving forward, opening up again? What are your
mm,
plans going forward?
mm. The first thing is definitely to restarting back to my cooking class after those lockdowns, and then I had a maternity leave about 6 months, 5 months. So just to get back to where I was while complying all the coronavirus safety plans. So just while we're safe, then I can run a class. That's something definitely first things I need to get back up. Um, but moving forward, as you mentioned earlier, the class I did with the kids, and young teens, I did only probably a couple of occasions I did. Then every time I really enjoyed, and then I just realized just to influence the young people could make really big impact to them, for long term. So I just really enjoy to teaching the young people. So that's something I would love to get into a bit more. And then also the teaching mothers with the babies and the kids. Just as my personal experience, having my first child over the last year, I just found to know the Asian how to cook, to knowing how to cook Asian food or Japanese food really helps to feed the baby as well. Um, it just really simple way to be in a, feed more vegetables, and then with small portion of the meat, and also just all the balanced out, very well balanced food, and then that's not hard at all. Again, just once you know the basics, you can just change it over to other ingredients, and it really easy. It's not that hard. Um, So I just wanted to get into that area as well to teach how to cook even more easier to everyday's cook to just prepare something in half an hour for the dinner for the day. So just I wanted to help out more mothers, not mothers only, the mothers and the fathers with the young children. That's something I would love to do more, I think. Yeah.
That's great. We got a nice comment from Kyle Russell. Thanks, Kyle. He said, "You have boosted my confidence in trying more Japanese cooking at home. Thank you
Ah,
again."
that's awesome.
That's lovely. And I think, even for me and people who've lived in Japan for so long, I always had the
Mm,
idea that Japanese cooking was too hard. And
mm,
luckily, my kids grew up in the Japanese school system. So my son has started doing more cooking, Japanese cooking, because they
mm,
learn it at school. And but
mm,
I think a lot of people, we don't have access to learning the basics of Japanese cooking.
mm,
So I think what you're doing is a great service. And it's also,
mm,
even though you're in Australia, it's such good branding for Japan because people are interested in Japanese food, they want to come visit Japan. They're interested in Japanese food, they want to buy Japanese products, right? I mean, it's all part of the sustainable brand of Japan. So thank you so
mm,
much. You're doing a great
mm.
job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a great to make a little bit, impact to everyone interested. And there are so many people coming to my class that they've been to Japan recently and then they found how amazing culture is and then the food culture is just so great and then they just wanted to learn more and then they're just coming back from Japan and say, oh, I want to learn more and I want to cook Japanese food here. So that, yeah, like yourself, that's people in Japan, make them so much blessed with all the Japanese culture while they're there, while they're in Japan, then come back and they're just even trying to find more culture, Japanese culture in Melbourne. That also really works for us well. So yeah, it's just somebody like you, Joy, to help in those people coming into Japan, inspired more. It's just brilliant for like us in living in Australia as well.
That's great. And I hope to see more of your vegan Japanese cooking because I think that's a hurdle for a lot of Japanese restaurant owners
Mm,
in Japan or
mm,
Japanese people who are trying to accept tourism or inbound tourists,
mm,
but they really don't have any idea how can I
mm,
make it vegan or how can I make it vegetarian. So if you're
mm,
teaching it in Australia, you're helping, even though you're not in Japan, you're helping in some way because
mm,
people feel more familiar with the
mm,
flexibility. You don't
mm,
have to have the fish stock or anything. So that
mm.
might be maybe for the future. I would love to see you do online classes as well.
Ah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, that's another part of the area I should get into. And then yeah, and I'm just not doing it much. But this is probably a great start because actually this is essentially the first ever live streaming interview or even in front of the camera. This is the first time for me. So
Oh,
probably
well,
this
you're
will
you're
help
a
me to get
natural.
started.
You could easily do it. You're a natural.
Oh, you
I'm
helped me.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people around the world who would love to take your class. So maybe in the future, next year, if you feel ready, maybe you can try an online class. I'd love to help you
Yeah,
get started if you need
yeah,
help. Yeah.
that'd be great. That'd be fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Chika. That was great today.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. That was really fun. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. And thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions and comments. Tomorrow, we're talking at 5 p.m. Japan time with Matt Ketchum. He runs a website about finding Akiya and moving from the city to the Inaka. So that should be really fun. Online class, wonderful. Maki Ki says, thank you. Thanks for joining. Everybody, have a good day. Take care. Bye.
Bye.